All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Human Resources Science Friday discussion. Today's gonna be led by Mercedes Sullivan. We haven't known each other too long, but just in the few interactions we've had, she's become one of my favorite people to talk to. We both have a background in nonprofit, so we've been talking about some things there, how to kind of take our skills we've learned in HR tech space into the nonprofit. But she's very passionate, very expressive, just very fun to talk to. She posts great memes on LinkedIn, so you definitely should follow her. So our group, our kind of the purpose of our group is to is to amplify voices in the HR tech, data, HR analytics space, especially those that may not get the voice. You know, we all know the big popular names, but there's a lot of people out there doing lots of great things that don't always get their voice, and so we trying a lot of different things. I'm going to post after I get done talking. I'm going to post a link to a survey that we're doing to try to find people that are interested in either consuming content or producing content or both. We also created a form for people that are interested in leading these discussions. We're always looking for people that are doing cool things or have cool ideas that want to lead these discussions. We've had some fantastic discussions lately. We have a YouTube that those are all posted on, and we'll post this one there as well. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Mercedes.
All right. Hi, everybody. I see a lot of my teammates here. So I brought cheerleaders, so I wouldn't be talking to myself and Tim. So thank you for those of you that I don't know. So let me share my screen real quick and just make sure that you can see it. Can I get I can see thumbs up? Yep. All right. So we're going to do three things today, and hopefully it's a good use of our collective time. We'll talk a little bit about who you're talking to or who's talking to you, and then who you're going to interact with. The why, what, how of our Agile story and lessons learned. As you can probably tell by now, I'm quite informal. So feel free to ask questions at any time. And if it doesn't make sense or if I'm going too fast, please stop me and let me know. Before I do that, Tim, I see there's a chat stuff in here that you're posting.
Stuff I'm posting, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye on it too if there's questions that come up in the chat.
Yeah, and I know we have a small group, and if you wanted to quickly introduce yourself, just with what is the one thing that you're hoping, like your name, and what is the one thing you're hoping to get from today, that'd be cool. And I guess Chris, we'll start with you.
Hey, Chris Ross, how's everybody doing? I have worked with Mercedes in the past on the Agile story for HR. It's something I've always been interested in. And so I'm just hoping to see, what has progressed since the last time she and I kind of checked in.
All right. Lourdes.
Hi, Nordis Gomez, based out of Miami, Florida, part of EMEB, which is a digital telehealth company, and really excited to learn more about HR science and what this group has to offer. And already excited because I love the vibe. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Matt, who teaches me Agile every day. Hi, Matt.
Hello, I'm Matt. I'm the director of the Agile Center of Excellence at TIAA, and I've worked with Mercedes on quite a few things that she's been doing over the past year when it comes to agility.
Translation, he teaches Mercedes Agile. John.
Hi, everyone. I'm John Kelly. I'm running a people analytics team now. I have an analyst, and I'm hiring an engineer and a data scientist. And we're going to rebuild the team in an agile format. So I've done that before, but I definitely want to sort of understand a little more of this and maybe some different tactics to take as we're sort of developing the team together.
Fantastic. Elena.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you, Elena Carrasquel. I'm a program manager at TIAA for HR. And I'm curious to see how this work and really the theory comes to life, right? Here where am I? We're kind of in the trenches all day. It's really kind of taking a step back, seeing how it looks from a bit from afar. It's always interest to me because that's really where I think some of the value lies, seeing how the work is being portrayed and so on. So really excited and curious to see what you have for us today, Mercedes.
Thanks, Elena. And Dave? Do you leave me? Did we call him out? And he's like, I'm out. Dave, either you're mute or you like completely are ignoring me, and both are fine because Dave and I work together. He's with Mercer and he helped us a lot with some of our skills work. So if he doesn't come back, we'll brag on
Hi,
him.
Mirche. Thanks for
There you
having
go.
me here. It's to learn about your journey on Agile and be more informed about what you do and the people you work with do. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And then Soheb.
Hey, good afternoon. So I'm Zaheb. I work as an HCM consultant for UKG Technology, and I help clients implement HR tech and with user adoption. And my interest is because I had a conversation with one of the technology leaders. He said, like, you know what? HR is never a product owner because they really don't own anything because the product is owned by someone else. That really got me curious. It's like, so when you use the term product owners, is HR ever considered to be a product owner, or it's only the technical team, or it's only functions like finance or IT or supply chain are considered to be product owners? So I was very curious, like productizing HR. So are we saying that is HR a product owner? So I'm just curious to see what's been your experience on that front.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm going to preface this by saying that I am not a prescriptive Agile person. So some of my coaches here and other Agilists are going to cringe with a lot of the things that I say, and they're going to love me anyway, because I love them back. But to me, it's more than mindset, and I'll talk you through how I feel of it. But many people fully disagree with me. So this is good that we're having this conversation.
Years later, under the leadership.
Did I miss anybody? I think.
Hey, Mercedes, this is Rebecca. I'm probably like Pixel. I thought I had entered my name, but you know, Pixel is my phone. But anyway, I'm here. I've been a partner in crime with Mercedes, so I'm just looking forward to hearing her take on Agile.
Thank you. Rebecca was our very first hire for agility and helped us change our worlds. So with that, let me tell you a little bit about the person. So I've been with TIAA for about 11 years now. Before that, I did social movement consulting, how to get a group of people to act, whether it's voting or getting mental health care, or we did research on voucher systems for these Milwaukee systems, for example, just to see if that helped or hindered minority students, so on and so forth. So basically change management at the collective level. Prior to that, I spent about 10 years at CEB, now Gartner. I was the head of financial services research there. And yeah, so quite an interesting experience. TIAA was my client when I was at CEB. And of all my 600 financial services institutions, I knew that when I moved on, I really, really, really would only want to work for 2 financial services institutions, maybe 3, and TIAA was one of them. So do know that I applied 13 times to TIAA after I tried to move in and I was rejected within HR. So I restarted my career in IT with my little flip phone, having no idea what IT was. And still kind of don't, but this is where I got fascinated by, okay, I'm not technical, where do I fit in to add value? And I learned about agility. I try to keep pushing for HR, and a few years later, I've moved to HR, where I spent the majority of my time at TIAA people team, so HR leading our PMO and our delivery branch, and trying to push for about 6 years to move us to an agile mindset. It took a while. And then recently, about 3 weeks ago, I started a new role called the Storefront Architect, which is essentially how do you think about the front end. So if you think about your intranet or your HR portal, your online, offline experiences, and how people then consume the products on HR that you are delivering, or your product services offer. And at the personal level, I grew up in Acapulco, Mexico. I was a professional tennis player, self-taught high school, and then I ended up at Boston College with a tennis scholarship. I went there to become a nun. The Jesuit counselor explained that I was too radical for the church and recommended international studies, which I did, thankfully, because it turns out I like getting married. So that was a win. And then I did my master's degree at the University of Sydney in Australia, also in international studies. At BC, it was more related to Latin America, US relations, but very, very focused on poverty in adulthood and privatization of pension systems, which for those of you that don't know, TIAA is focused on retiring inequality and providing lifetime income for people to retire with dignity. And then in Sydney, my focus was more Southeast Asia development, just to get a comprehensive view of that world. I am married with 2 kids that are now 13 and 15, and they keep me on my toes. And our 2 dogs, Luna and River, who owned my house. And so I just work here for them. For pastimes, I am a self-proclaimed geek. I love learning absolutely everything and anything. Literally, my brain is like, so if you have anything geeky or exciting that you've learned, please pass it my way. And then I go into my Netflix modes, and that's me. I mean, it's literally how I look after I watched every murder show available to Netflix, because I claim that I have mental health issues, and that clearly helps. And for fun, traveling, street food, and chocolates. I don't need much more in life. And then just wanting to leave you with an interesting tidbit. For some reason, I'm cool with all the snakes that live around here. I can skydive, I can run random things, I could travel the world to scary places, but I can't do frogs. I was once in Mexico about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and I went to the bathroom in the middle of the night and a friendly frog jumped out of it from the back. And since then, we'll never do frogs again, ever. So now you know, if you ever wanted to prank me, hint to my team, we'd love to do that. That's where it's at. But so to sum it all up, my career has always been focused on either as a professional athlete on development, how to develop people, how do you get better? Because I always notice, for example, the junior players that I play with that were the best in the world didn't translate to professional or vice versa. So how does development work? What is the context around it? Then I applied that at the international level, or at the state and country and global level with my international studies background. And all of that came honing into how do we apply it at the organization at TIAA and developing towards an outcome. So how do you ensure that the people individually and the system and the context are best aligned to win in the marketplace? And genuinely, when I found Agile, I'm like, that's it, that's it. Not necessarily intact, and that there's different ways. And of course, to me, as I said, I don't prescribe. I am a constructivist, meaning that I think it's incredibly important that you take a look at your context, you understand your situation, just as I wouldn't apply what works in Mexico, the same policy in Switzerland. It's not the same context, the same thing for agility. But to me, this is where my love of it started. And I was obsessed with how do we apply this in HR? And why isn't HR leading the way in agility when it's all about behaviors and how do you actually get a group of people to act better? So with that, let's start on the journey of why Agile. So when I started with the PMO and I started leading that group, we had a bucket of, every year I got like a Christmas list of here's like 1 million projects for us to do. They were really difficult to prioritize. As an organization, we're slow to deliver. We didn't have iterative testing, and it was more like a pray and hope approach, and in which when we went live, we did change management and all the due diligence, but you know, if you put all the effort and you go live and it don't work, that's it. You have to start over. And we seldom cut our losses. We went all in, and that's that. So I started investigating more about Agile, and as I said, people like Matt that try to teach me, and then are patient with me when I call the wrong thing differently. And we started on the journey. So after a few years of actually annoying my leadership, they're like, finally, okay, hire somebody with the skills. So Rebecca, who's on the call, came in and started helping us kind of set the structure. But my goal was to have this continuous delivery process in which we were doing the right value to the right people at the right time in the right way, but always focus on the end goal of our organization. So how I sold it back to our teams was, in order to enable all of that, it needs to start with us. agility is showing us by with data and other examples that this is a better way to go, or at least to try, because whatever we're doing is not working, at least to try. So in order to do that, we could benefit from agility for ourselves. This is from 2020, but Gartner had a statistic that our agile skills for HR went up by 160% over 3 years, and I think that's just increasing. But as importantly, as we scale ourselves, then we can apply that as a structure within the people team so that we can better deliver it together. And then by default, by us doing it and understanding it, we will be much more able to then enable the organization to do that themselves. Right now, for example, Matt sits in a little island for the COE for agility, and he's trying to convince everybody to do so, when really, to me, if HR owns culture, habits, behaviors, and all of these things, we should be understanding how this works so that we can enable it. And if we enable that and understand how people are working differently, then we can do products that actually help them succeed. So for example, if you're now working on a network versus like the structured teams before, why are we doubling down on the manager? Why are we paying that way? Why are we looking at jobs versus skills? So there's so many other questions that come up for organizational effectiveness that are really important. But unless you actually do the work this way or really understand it, it's really hard to enable that for the organization. So I thought this would be a really good start. And I always come back with the beauty of agility is that it's a test and iterate. And if it doesn't work, you fall fast, fail, and move on. So let me pause here to see if there's any questions.
Not a question, Mercedes, but I think you and I talked about this before. I think whether you're in like you work for Gartner or not, or you have that data, I think as HR professionals, as you interact with the business, you learn that, you've kind of got to operate like the business to be able to support them, right? You're using the same language, kind of operating the same way, doing projects the same way. So for me, by default, I was drawn to Agile just from supporting leaders that were operating in Agile and feeling like there was a disconnect in the way we manage projects as the people team comparatively to what they were doing. And it just, and it, in my previous life in supporting engineering and construction, it was the same thing. It was like, if they're talking about managing their projects a certain way, we as the people team have to adjust to the business, right? In order to do it. So I would just share that, because that, without having all of those data points, I think just as a people team professional, you as a business partner, you kind of learn to kind of, when in Rome, you do what the Romans do from a business perspective, because we can always kind of do what we do, but we just kind of have to adjust how we do it to be aligned to the business. And that makes that in the Agile space, it made sense.
Yeah, thank you for that. All right, so we all had to start with what is Agile. And one of the things I quickly learned is that there's so many definitions everywhere, but I did find Natal and Rina, and if you don't follow them on LinkedIn, or they have a channel in YouTube, they have a lot of case studies about how different companies operate in Agile within HR. So it's very specific, and it really quickly made me realize that we had to adapt it for our purposes. We're not tech-based, what have you, so we had to adapt it. Not only that, but the skills and the context of the people that we have using it had to be different. But in a nutshell, this helped me explain that what we're doing is that we're putting the customer at the center. We are starting with human-centered design, which that sounds fine, but then I know we say it, but we never talk about it. That literally just means, what do you actually do day to day? What does it look like now? And what actually works for you in the context today? We are so used to, this is what HR does, instead of what does my customer need and value to succeed, and then enable that. So that's a different muscle for us to practice. And so we started shifting in that direction. And then we started defining the work and prioritize it by that. The other difference is that for us, we had to flex the muscle of incremental delivery with team capacity in mind, testing, learning, and iterating with the customer loops. And finally, one of the things I like the most here is that it's data-driven, because we tended to do a lot of prioritization and work based on feelings. And so this is getting us in that direction of data-driven so that we can do the right thing. Because if it's not a hell yes, we shouldn't be doing it. So that's a definition that I borrowed. If you haven't read the book, I recommend it. It's really interesting and very practical for the HR space specifically. Now, how did then, after looking at this, I'm like, okay, if I'm the owner of the PMO, what are the components that I need to put in place to enable that transformation? Because before, my services or my products within the PMO were, we have project managers and we deliver big projects. I help you prioritize and with your roadmap for the year. But this time we had to do 6 things to get us moving. So first and foremost, it was the mindset shift, which we're still working 3 years later, and it's the hardest one, and that needs to be continuously reinforced. Upskilling, then we would help our teams organize as an agile group. We would then ensure that our product owners and teams help set outcomes, metrics. We had voice of the customer and data feedback loops. We led the design, plan, and connect meetings, which, as you know, maybe called PI sessions or different methodology in Agile, but we try to simplify. And then the one that caused some of the most turmoil was centralizing our tracking in Jira, which, side note, a few days ago, our Jira was completely gone and we thought we lost all our work. And I just laughed in anxiety for like an hour and a half. But I think it's back, so. Okay, so let me pause here and see if you have any questions on this, because it was really hard. It was really hard to start with explaining the epics and the features and all these things. I started with basically telling the leadership, here's the 6 things and components that we're going to work with, and we'll walk you through each of them individually, and that was a lot easier to consume.
Mercedes, no, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So you mentioned the term like product owners, right, out here. So when you refer to product owners, are you referring to the process owners or the function leads of the HR function?
Yeah, if we can hold with that question, the next slides will show you exactly what the products are and who the product owners are. Because to your question, and let me answer that here. Think of when I say product owner in more of a, I'm borrowing from the mindset of Agile. So to me, there's things that HR owns. So like onboarding, like we have plan, hire, onboard, engage. Those are the things that we own. But then that's what HR does to the business. So those are some of our products. What I want to do is that right now, that's like 80% of our work. I would like that to be like 20 to 30 to 40%, so that the rest of the capacity is done so that we can enable the actual products in the organization. And in that case, that's where we do not own. We just are part of the skill set of people or human capital that supports and enables other work. So I see that as twofold, but I am borrowing from the product mentality so that, for example, we have a team that does all our hiring. So we have a hire product owner. I hope that makes sense.
So which of these things did you kind of start with or put in place first, and or I guess looking back, are there things that you wish you would have done sooner than you did or put in place before you did other things?
Yeah, let me answer that in a minute, because I'm going to have a whole like what I thought I was going to do, what worked, what didn't, and he's going to hit all of that. But is there any other question here? Okay, so how did we get started? So it all sounded really well and good, and I was like so excited that we could go, but then I had like no idea what to do. So at the same time that we were starting this, we got strategic funding for a project called Skills of the Future that came with an owner and a group of people. So the added bonus to that was that the person leading, or the project lead, was really into trying agility. So she became that product owner of the Skills of the Future component. So we identified her and the right group of people with the right skills to come together. We really focused on the projects to product focus, meaning instead of a big bang, there's milestones, what have you, we're going to break things into components, we're going to plan quarterly, and we're going to deliver iteratively together. And Rebecca, who's on the call again, was my first hire. And so she helped us start kind of putting together the teams and guiding us as to how we worked. And then I called my lifeline, Matt, the whole time. I'm like, are we doing it right? He's like, no, but keep going. So that was so helpful. And then what helped in here is to show them how we reduced silos with a cross-functional team, because they were coming together, and I'll show you an example in a minute. And we really, really try to plan by focusing on team capacity, because one of the biggest things that we always heard is we don't have capacity, we don't prioritize, So this started to show them how we can actually do that together, which would have been impossible otherwise with my little Christmas or whatever holiday list that I got every 3 months that changed every time someone had a new pet project. And then transparency, what really helped us having our shared cadences and processes. And even though there was a semi-revolution when we try to put people in Jira, we succeeded, and now that we're there. So my moral of the story here is commit, keep going, even if it's not perfect, and then you can iterate, because eventually repetition is perfect. But yeah, so I would say of the things here, start small, start with a POC. To me, always the more important thing will be the right person. And to me, the right product owner, just like in Waterfall, the right project lead makes or breaks. So obviously everybody's really important, but without the leader, like my great friend Elena here says, don't work harder than your client. If you're trying to lead the project as the Scrum Master or the project manager, it ain't gonna work. So this is what really helped us. And we learned a lot what worked and didn't within that. And they learned really quickly from planning session to planning session, which then allow us to have a footprint for other products to launch next. So I'll pause here to see if there's questions. Okay, so how we sold the mindset. I try to explain it a million times, and the only thing that ever worked was this picture. So keep it super simple, keep it in pictures. I try to help them understand that we tend to create, we don't right fit for the solution. And sometimes you think that you want something, but when you try it, it's not what it is. So this helped us iterate. So this was really helpful for the mindset of incremental delivery. The other one that was so helpful is people just couldn't understand product. And so I totally understand, because it's not a concept. I just didn't know what else to call it. It may not be a product, it's the thing owner. But the key point is, for example, when we look at projects, I get components of things. Every other year, I got a project around onboarding and the offer letter. And who owns the offer letter? We don't know, but project manager, you deal with it. And literally, my life was this. It's legal, it's CA, it's compliant. And we spent hours doing that. So what helped was explain that if the product is higher, anything that enables that hiring is what belongs in that product. And normally within the project, what made people really nervous is that by saying I own the offer letter, for example, it meant that they needed to do it. And by default, they had to be the project manager because it depended on so many other people that they didn't want to do that. Whereas if you have a product and a team, and we already have a cadence that meets regularly, they know that they just can come to that meeting that is already set with everybody that has those skills, and they're not going to have to deal with that. They're just going to have to work on what needs to be prioritized and upheld for us to be hiring better. And if the offer letter is a priority over anything else, people then stop working on other stuff so they can focus on this because it's a priority, and actually find themselves with capacity to do so instead of just being bitter and pointing the finger at each other. So let me see if you have questions here.
So it sounds like you all were already coming from an existing, like you had kind of a project, like you used projects within HR. I know for a lot of the places I've worked, like they're not even doing that. Like they're, just kind of handling things as they come along. So I wonder if would that be easier to transition to a product mindset where you don't have that, or if it'd be harder, or how would you kind of start things off right if you wanted to make how you do things more structured?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if it's working for you with projects regularly and you're delivering on time, keep it. The point is not to just do Agile for the purpose, but once you're big enough or complex enough, and you're finding that you're just not delivering on time and organizing, I would absolutely start working on this way. And it can even be just for things that are more necessary. There might be other things that you make changes every once in a blue moon, you don't care. Again, this is where I go back to understanding your context, testing and iterating what works for you. But yeah, I mean, to me, I always say that if you put a structure in place for you to just show up and deliver and check in continuously, it is going to be way better than if 20% of your time is fixed on, now it's a project, now I have to set up a meeting, who's the right team, they don't have capacity. It's so much wasted time. And at the end of the day, it's never aligned, because if you try to fix the offer letter and then somebody else is fixing God knows what over here, you're going to break something. Because by fixing the offer letter, you're breaking something in comp, you're breaking something in payroll, you're breaking something in legal. So I would always say, take a holistic view of the thing that you're fixing. And instead of going top down, go sideways, so that you can bring the teams together and deliver incrementally. Now, once we had our team, so that's higher, we have then an example of what happens if you have different teams and you plan together. So for example, in this meeting, we had the hire on board, plan, hire, and onboard teams together. And at the beginning of our quarterly meetings, which we meet for 2 days, everybody comes in and does a readout of here's the things that we're planning to do for the quarter, so that we can align. And perfect example here, the product owner for onboarding says, hey, we have these new welcome kits, and this is our plan for it. Normally, if it was a project, they would have done that. And then the project manager would have been like, oh, did you get approval from legal? God says meeting with legal. Did you get approval from payroll? God says a mess. And then you finish all of that, and then you went to compliance fast because you're kind of trying to, or risk because you're kind of trying to ignore them and pretend like it's all good. And then you get in there and they're like, you cannot do your project. So it derailed a lot of time. Whereas here, because in the room, we had our product owners, the different ones that connected, our IT partners, legal, risk and compliance, the PMO, everybody's present in these meetings together, listening to the same information. Immediately within that conversation, we had people with the questions. Can we validate that this is a gift? Did it go through the governance process? So on and so forth. And even to tactical questions like from our team that does Workday, when it's onboarding? Is it when you switch this thing to not? So we were able to very, very quickly identify all the components that needed to be done. And if this was a priority, other work then got deprioritized, because now these different teams had something on their plate to enable this work. And this is how eventually we all start to plan together and align. So this was really, really powerful. And that's when eventually our leaders finally understood. They came to one of our planning meetings and they're like, oh, you guys are doing all of this together? Yeah, yes. It's a lot easier to see than when you tell them about the epics and features and just this mystery planning meetings. So that was a really big win for us. And I was very proud of the team for getting us here. All right. So I'll do a couple of more slides and then I'll open for questions. But some of the outcomes, like for me, and you, Tim, you asked, yes, I had 73 projects, but at some point I had 140 or something. And it was me tracking them on Excel. I support 13 leaders then, and I had to go one by one, be like, what are your projects? And I type it and I try to do them. By the time that I did that, something else had changed. So when we introduced Jira, we made it more scalable. It was a little rough, yes. And it still needs some work. But first, it reduced our risk and provided business continuity. If I left, it's okay. Somebody else can just look at the information. It's right there. There's traceability. We get audited all the time, so we can have a way to do that. And now we know what everybody else is doing, and we can plan together. And most importantly, it didn't depend on me entering all this stuff. All of us were accountable for doing that work ourselves, which led to separate problems and having to make sure people are accountable for doing so, which does require some leadership support to ensure that people are working through that. Secondly, because we can do that, I no longer just had visibility into the portfolio. Here's my big projects. But I actually, because we broke down things into smaller chunks, I started to see how much work people were doing. What was really cool, for example, if you look at one of these things, is that I started to see that the majority of our work we put in Q4. I'm like, but yo, Q4 is horrible. And there was like like, for example, and there was little in Q2 and Q3. So we were able to start understanding our habits and work much better, or at least prioritize to try to do that way, so that we will leave room for the end of year compensation and all the other BAU stuff, because these are just projects. But as we mature, I wanted to embed in the BAU components of things that take a lot of time, because projects and BAU shouldn't be separate to me. It's people and work. So how do you manage your collective time together with what's most important? Because if your projects are not as important as the work that you're doing and it's the same people doing it, then you need less time to do so. So it just brings a lot of data for you to be able to know how you're doing. Like when you start running and if you run really willy like I do, and then you start actually measuring, you're like, oh crap, I thought I was flying, and it's like 20 minutes per mile. And so you start noticing, my first one is faster than my second one. So you start tweaking. This allows for the same. But for me, one of the most satisfying things and the biggest wins was going from like this ridiculously long list of projects that were prioritized once a year to this quarterly, to only 8, because we do have some that we can't escape from. And a lot of them are like pet projects that are like sensitive in nature. But the majority of the teams then became quarterly roadmap driven. And it was so much easier to not have to commit for a year, to then be able to incrementally plan together and manage the time based on the quarter that we had ahead of us. Because otherwise, new things come up, and you all know it. I remember vividly, for the past 3 years that I did my 1-year strategic planning, we planned like, September, October for the next year. By the time January came in, 80% of the work that I had on my plate was new, not prioritized back then. So it was a waste of time. So this allows you to know what you're committing to, but allow for things as they come in and to pivot, and also to cut your losses if something is not working and move forward. And then the last thing I will say here is that by doing this and limiting the work in progress, because our operations team was also doing the same, we saw a doubling on our delivery speed. So if, for example, if we could do 4 features in a month, we were doing 8 just by simply reducing the time that the focus on the work that we were doing. So yeah, big changes, actually, a lot of loves, tears and sweat. We had no funding. It was all a labor of love and pushing. And I'll show you in a minute what we're doing next and our lessons learned. But any questions on here? Okay. So where are we now? And so here's just to your question. How we think of products in this context is plan, attract, hire, onboard, develop, engage, pay, reward, etc. And then we have an enablement and culture team that also thinks in Agile. So it's tricky to think of culture as a product for agility, but the important thing is the mindset of how we're planning together. Are we planning quarterly? Are we breaking things into components? Are we iterating? And everybody takes what works for them and drops what doesn't. As I said, this right now is about 80% of the work we do to the business, but we also have CHROs and then other people, HRBPs that directly support each of the lines of business. The hope is that this would free some time so that we wouldn't just be doing this for the business, but rather listening to the business for what they need, and then free capacity to then enable those sorts of things to the enterprise. But for now, this is working pretty well for us, because now we're starting to align and we're starting to understand who are our key customers or personas. What's next for us is continue to have these agile teams and then enhance how we plan together. But where we really need to get much better at is now the voice of the customer data inputs, the release. How do we show what we're releasing so it's not like a mess of like a million things, and so that we don't rain HR on the business? So we're clear, hey, this quarter, this is what's new. We have a ways to go. And most importantly, link it back to the outputs that we want to see, the outcomes. Not outputs, outcomes. Is this really in service of our business? Is this helping us win? Because if at the end of the day, none of that is actually happening, then why are we doing that? It's just noise. So in short here, right now, we've made progress on setting up the foundational structure, and we're getting a lot more efficient, getting a lot more efficient. But now I need to work on getting effective. Is this actually creating the outcomes that we want to see? And that's where it really matters. Probably other people have successfully started from the outcomes back, but I generally try to start from bottoms up, then middle, top down. I fail like 80 times, and this is the only way that we can at least get moving to get us to a place where we can have enough structure Like I always call it, I got the team on the bike. Just get them on the bike. Now they know how to bike. Once they're biking, then you can move them in the whatever road you need to go to. But before they're like, oh, there's a wheel, not interested. So this is where we are right now. And again, let me pause to see if there's questions. All right, so my last slide, sure, yeah, it's my lessons learned. So let me tell you the grand plans that I had and what didn't work at all, and then what did. So I thought, cool, which is really, really ironic because we're doing Agile and I wanted to big bang it. Lesson learned number 1. Anyway, I'm like, all right, cool. I'm very excited. People are gonna be excited. This makes total sense. I am so clear at communicating. We got this. I'm gonna sell this to my leadership, get a sponsor, and then we're just gonna train everybody and it's gonna be great. They're gonna be so happy that they learned this skill, they understand their client, and we're gonna bring some value. Then I'm gonna get the right people with a mix of skilling the current PMs that we have and then bringing from outside, like inside the firm, but outside of HR. And we'll start with a POC, which by the way, was approved from our leadership. And initially they wanted us to do onboarding as the initial POC. So then what happened? Well, yeah, my leaders heard and they were all in and they're like, go do it. But it was clear to me that that meant that they still thought this was more like a project management thing and they didn't really have to do anything. They're like, that's awesome, go do it. It's not gonna impact me. But that's not how it works. So we didn't really have in practice buy-in until much later. Now we do. And the other thing we learned is that the in-class training, we try to take the SAFE training, just left us completely so overwhelmed. In fact, I was taking it for a week and after 3 days, I'm like, I'm out. I don't want to do Agile. I'm done. Somebody take over. So we really quickly adapted and Rebecca was a trooper. She put so much work into she tried like so many different things, but we were all grumpy and we don't like change. And also I was like, velocity and things that I don't understand. No. So what ended up working for the tweak there is that and as I'll say on my last point, we build consensus from the bottom up. So we say, you know what, if a POC works, there's nothing more challenging or exciting for humans than to see somebody else succeed, because then you want what they want. So then we try to ensure that whatever we were doing with our POC was so visible and good that then other POs be like, I want to do that. That sounds cool and innovative. So that's how we started. Clearly, doing the thing was better than the training. And for our purposes, it actually really showed. We messed up a lot when we started, but we quickly learned. And what started showing a lot of interest from our leaders eventually was showing them the data, like the doubling of our output or seeing how people came together, how the reduction of the projects and how we were planning better. So that started to get their attention. As for the right people, that really worked. My team, some of them here were just the best. But they were the best always, but really, really went all into trying to understand and upskill themselves. And it really made a difference. In fact, the PM that became the kind of scrum master or lead for our POC, she had no idea what Agile was and then trained herself and became really, really successful at that work. So that was very exciting. But then what I ended up doing is that on purpose, as I had a chance to hire, I purposely hired people with non-HR background that were internal to the company that had Agile skills. So Rebecca came from data governance. And then I hired the 3 other people. The other people that I hired were from different parts of the organization so that they could bring a different point of view of how it feels like to work here, but also their Agile practices. And that worked really well, except the tweak there, even though I sold it really clearly, is the same thing that I talk to Matt all the time. I said, I want Agile without prescription. So show me what that may look like, and we're going to reinvent, because I don't want to follow the best practice. I want to be the best practice. And that means to me that you have to create something that doesn't yet exist because only you know your context. So you're going to get hate for not following the thing or for calling it whatever. Cool. Are you getting the results? That's what matters to me. With the caveat that obviously be respectful. If there's an industry standard, don't nilly-willy, like I was like Scrum Master at this. And then my team were like, no. And they were completely right. I cannot just make stuff up because I want to, right? Politicians can, but apparently if you work in a corporation, you can't. I'm in the wrong field. And then finally, with the POC, we actually started with onboarding. But the product owner wasn't fully on board and it wasn't staffed. They're like, hey, here, have this product, but you have no people and you also own something else. And then the teams were starting to be really, really confused with the jargon. So as a tweak, we find a product owner that was better suited for her project and also her interest. And that's what we used to iterate. And we significantly simplified the terms, which really actually helped us move ahead. And then from there, honestly, it was just a matter of testing and iterating and moving it forward. And, you know, going back and forth with the teams, ensuring that the people that are brought from the outside had HR expertise, because I also came from the outside of HR and I was very arrogant with my, what are these HR people doing? What do they know? HR is one of the hardest things to do ever. It's a business within a business. It's so complex. I mean, what I loved about my job is that I could do payroll, compensation, time tracking, absence, talent, operations, tech. It never ends. We have 24 countries, so it just dealing with regulations from Germany alone is like its own thing. So it is so complex. It's hard to see how things interrelate as a product, perhaps. But once you start knowing more, it really becomes a lot more apparent, and why Agile becomes even more important in helping us grow together. Because if you change one thing over here, you break something over there. So either we do this now, or we're gonna continue to show up in silos. And then finally, I will say that through the trials and tribulations, now that we have a structure set up and all the tears are gone from a lot of these pains, it's not perfect, but I feel very, very good about AI coming and our ability to quickly pivot to what we need to do. If AI was coming right now and I didn't have this structure in place, it may be a lot more painful, or we may have to just grab people and put them and pull them. But now I feel like doing this work really sets you up for what's to come, in which our job probably is not going to matter as much as solving problems. And what's important to me is that we have a bucket of people that are problem solvers, that are diverse, and they're together and they're ready to go, to adapt, to think differently to what's to come. Because if we're already testing and iterating and using the data, that's our best way to survive, providing our legal risk and compliance departments allow us to put in practice what we dream of. But yeah, so hopefully that made sense. Start small, do your POC, fail fast. It's gonna suck. Build a coalition. Don't underestimate the power of a product owner seeing that another one is succeeding. And have a lot of humor. Surround yourself with good people that want to succeed and win, that talk about changing the world, and that want to see you win. And then come and share with us how you're changing the world so we can learn together. So yeah, that's my presentation, and then I'll open up to see if you have any questions.
Mercedes, a great presentation. I definitely appreciate it. I think this is an area that HR doesn't talk about enough, so I'm really glad you're sort of bringing a lot of focus to it. You mentioned AI a little bit, and I would love to talk about that. In HR side, we do have a lot of conversations about AI in HR, but a little more like on the tactics level, right? So you talked about Jira, you talked about sort of how to organize the team. One of the things I've struggled with a little bit is sort of deciding how we want to define an epic, how we want to define a story, how we want to define a task. Technology has their own sort of definitions to those in Jira. How do you sort of think about that from an HR perspective? Do you really follow very strict guidelines to that? How did you implement that? Is there anything you sort of learned over your time with that?
And do you mean within Jira, or do you mean how we think about it? Do you mean tactically in Jira, or as in the thought of how do we define epics, features, and stories regardless?
Both of them, really, right? Because like Jira has to be a reflection of reality to some degree. So if there's a difference, that would be interesting.
So I have other people here that might answer. Like Rebecca, you can feel free. But what I will say is we have Jira and Jira Align in different parts of our organization. And we, in our team, we had Jira only. So we had to, in order to actually just put us in Jira, we had to just use it in whatever form that we could at the beginning. So for us, how it started is, for example, the skills of the future, just breaking it into components, and normally as a project, it'd be one epic skills of the future. Whereas now we started breaking down several epics for the skills of the future. Some was the skill mapping, some was more on the technology components, and so on and so forth. What works for us is that the teams got to define it together, because the product owners on the business side, on the HR side, our tech partners, our legal compliance, all of them are on the same meetings. So we're deciding how to break it down together for those components. Now, when we're enablers and we're doing work and we have to put our own stuff somewhere else, then we just follow whatever the business wants us to do, because a lot of the times they're in Jira line and that's completely different. So my answer to you for that is like, if you're struggling, is because it's a hot mess and I have no idea how to fix it. And we just did our best to put it in there. But what we are at least trying to do is, and Rebecca, I think you can show, it depends of, like, features were 3 months, right? And epics up to a year.
I was just going to mention that one of the rules that we use, because it is hard, right? And sometimes you have the concept of what you want to do, but then it's like, how do I start breaking it down, right? So one of the simple things that we start utilizing is breaking it down by time, right? And that's one of the things that Agile wants, is start break things down into smaller chunks so you can manage those smaller chunks. So what we did, it was our epics are 12 months. If you're following the scale framework, it says 18 months, but we say, we're still following the calendar year. Let's just do 12 months. The features were quarterly, right? So 3 months, no more than 3 months. And then the stories, depending on the maturity of the team, you can do the regular sprints, 2-week sprints. We were doing a month just because it's easier to just say, okay, let's just work for June. Let's just work for July. So that's what we started. And that's where people started kind of breaking things that way. The next part, it was for them to think about, like, what is it that you're delivering, right? You need to start thinking about like something tangible, something that you can actually put out there in the system. So there is that ongoing delivery. It might not be completed, but at least you're looking into delivering something, right? So when you start thinking about at least the time and at least something that you can put out there, even if it's to pass it on to another team of saying, okay, I'm done building the brakes for the bicycle, right? Now it's going to go to those doing the gears. Right. So now you are breaking the components, right, of your product into smaller pieces and being able to transition them that way as you move forward with your life cycle.
Yeah, but I will say exactly as Rebecca said, it depended on the team maturity. For me, what was important is the habit and the muscle of breaking things down. I'm like, break it down however you want. But because, again, it's like you go to the gym and you know what, just learn how to do this little dumbbell. Right? So play around with it. And I would say, again, context. The things that I didn't think would work for us, and then vice versa. And then they always evolve as you move forward. But I don't know if anybody else has a different point of view on that. That one is still a struggle for us because nobody wants to align. And we're not in the same page.
Mercedes, what did you find was the business's emotional response to what you had completed? Not the numeric, but the emotional.
For what we've completed?
Yes.
And by business, you mean the actual end user?
Yes.
Well, it varies. So, for example, as you know, with our skills of the future, it was great that we were award winners for Workday on the Innovation Award, and we worked with you with all that stuff, but how is it landing on the business? And I think for that particular example, components of it landed really well, because for them, we're still not very good at being clear as to what it is that we're delivering. But the gigs component of that, what the skills is able to now enable for the gigs or what have you, is an example of something that at least our tech side was really excited about, because they have a really big goal of being a continuously learning organization. And they've built some guilds. There's 4 or 5 guilds, I don't remember, in which you go and learn about a specific topic. So part of that was enabling people to find gigs and other things to do so. So I think what they're discovering is that this way of working, or some of the value that we're adding, is starting to resonate a lot more with their needs, and we're starting to align a little bit better. But I honestly think we're not mature enough to yet know what we're doing and what we're delivering and where we're doing value, because I started with the process of putting this thing together and being more efficient, but I don't yet have linked it enough to the voice of the customer and data to see if we're effective. For that particular case, I know because of the feedback, but for others, and onboarding, we're starting to see some really good results and feedback that they feel seen, because as part of onboarding and the maturity, we also have governance, so that, for example, we're clear what's the enterprise, what's HR, what's your manager, and what's your area. But other than that, still remain to be seen. I want to give it a time, because the caveat here is I think we're doing great. But if we are not effective at the end of the day, and we were just more efficient, then that's a cool exercise, bro. But this is.
I'd like to chime in that one really quick. That's a really interesting question, because I do wonder if the vehicle or the mechanisms for the delivery, how present are they? Are they even existent? And I think it talks to Mercedes, the work that you're doing with the storefront, right? And David, I think it would be easier, or at least more effective and efficient to measure that, what you're talking about, right? On how is the business emotionally receiving that. I don't know if we have the mechanism to do that yet, to deliver so effectively and efficiently, at least at what we're seeing out there. So I'll be really curious, Mercedes, on measuring that aspect, but once the storefront is there, because I think that's really going to be the game changer for that.
Agree. And so for if I didn't mention that, for the storefront, we're looking at AI capability to have a more natural language-based ability to just for people to ask what we need. But it's gonna then directly relate back to are we providing the right service? Because it doesn't matter how cool my storefront is if what I'm selling is not what you want to consume. But yeah, it's interesting times, definitely, and great question, and one that I will be looking at closely, because right now, without data, we're going blind.
Well, yeah, thank you, Mercedes. And we're at the end of our time. So, I mean, I think if Mercedes wants to stay on and answer questions, feel free. But we really appreciate everybody joining. John put a link to our LinkedIn group. I'm going to put a link out here. We have another event, same time next week. It's just going to be a virtual kind of community hangout. We don't have a assigned speaker, but it's a time just to kind of come and meet other HR tech, data people analytics professionals. And then also, yeah, if you want to get involved with the community, I've posted the survey. There's our website page. Lots of ways to get involved. We try to do these every Friday. We're looking for speakers. I think right now we have a speaker for the 28th, but we're still looking for somebody for the 21st and then all of July. So if you're interested in leading one of these sessions, like, it doesn't have to be a formal presentation. It can just be kind of a discussion. But if you have anything, I know everybody here has something interesting they like to talk about. So if you're interested in doing that, you can fill out this form, or you can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Tim, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great job. Good to see everybody.